So I have here my motivational tree movement thing, right? My motivational tree movement sketch, which makes a tree that moves and then randomizes at height when it hits the other side, right? I would like to make bunches and bunches of randomized trees just like that one to make a random forest, right? So, in order to do that, I think it would probably be better if I had an object called a tree. Okay? In order to make an object, I looked on the object tutorial and I figured out that I have to use a certain form. So I need to say class tree bracket bracket. Pretty good with this guy? So this is your class. This is the cookie cutter that makes your object. Right? So what I mean by it's a cookie cutter is this thing is not itself a tree. This thing is going to make trees. You guys cool with that? In the same way that color in processing is not itself a color, it's a thing that makes colors. So, what do I need in the tree class? Since you guys were looking at the tutorial, what's my first thing I need? Yeah, I need a bunch of variables. So what are the variables that were important for my tree? These ones? Okay. Take those ones. Now, in the constructor, you don't initialize the variables. Okay. So, this is my constructor portion of my tree class. What comes next? Yeah, I need to go through and initialize all the variables, right? So this was just saying, hey, this is going to be a thing that I'm going to think of as being a tree, right? Like, this is not an individual tree. This is the idea of a tree. And the idea of a tree should have an x coordinate, a y coordinate, a variable called the speed, and an image that goes with it. You guys all cool with that? Okay, those are what I think is important to a tree. Are those necessarily the only things that are important to a tree? No. Certainly you could do other things. You could put a height and a width variable in here. Those would both be reasonable choices. You could put some kind of a transparency in here, or a layering, or whatever. Like, there's lots of stuff you could add to this. Yeah, and lots of people would argue that speed is a stupid thing to put in a tree. That's totally reasonable. These should be the things that are important about this kind of thing to you. And for me, the speed at which my trees move is important.
So are they all going to be moving at different speeds then?
They could be. We could make them all move at different speeds. And it would be easy. Because all I would have to do is change something in the constructor. You guys see that? So instead of going through and editing each and every individual tree, I could just change one thing in the constructor. When I initialize the speed variable, instead of setting it equal to 5, say, I could set it equal to a random number between 1 and 5. Right? And then it would have randomized speed, and that would be cool. We could do that. What comes next in your class declaration? What's next there? Yeah, I need to initialize the variables. So there's a tree. So if you're following along on the API for objects or the tutorial for objects, I'm basically miming this thing with a class called tree, and I'm making trees. So here I just have my data that's important about this thing. And now I'm going to actually declare this constructor part. So the constructor is the thing that's actually going to initialize those variables. This is the thing that actually makes your tree happen. So in my sketch here, I think about what did I initialize over here. Well, things that I initialized was I initialized a float x, a float y, a speed, and an image. So I'm going to set x equals, yeah, we can start them at 0. Y equals I wanted them to... Whatever. We'll set y as height over 2 initially. Is that a good idea? Why not?
Because we haven't declared height yet.
Oh, that's actually a fair point. I'm going to tend to put my classes below my setup and whatnots, and that'll get your height declared for you. This is actually not a terribly great idea, just because I would really rather if my trees started at random heights, right? So it might be a decent idea here to put in a random, and where do you want your tree to? You want your tree to be generated at a random height, right? So that should be random between 0 and height. Okay, what else do I want to initialize? Okay, speed needs to be set to something, so we'll set the speed to 3 or whatever to start with. I guess if I was following exactly along, I'd set it to 5, right? 5 felt a little seizure-y to me, so. What else do you want to initialize? Yeah, some of the stuff that's in this setup should probably come in here. Like, specifically my image should be loaded in this guy. Okay, what else? Is there anything else I declared? Anything else I needed? What other variables did I use? Width and height. Okay, so that tells me I should probably have a setup, right? So I'm going to come up here and I'm going to stick a setup in here. And I'm going to dump my load image command in there. Okay, so now that I've got a way to make trees, and that's really what this is. This is saying which variables are important to trees and what do they start at. So now I've got my data and my constructor down. Now what do I need to do? Yeah, there are 2 things that are important for my tree to do. Those are display the tree and move. So if I want to display and move, I can really just straight up copy those out of the example. Oh, what did I just jack up? Yeah, I didn't copy display, I copied draw instead. I definitely don't want to copy draw. That shouldn't be a thing that trees do. But a thing that trees should be able to do is be displayed. So I want my display method in here. And cleaning up my code just a little bit. Okay, so let's see. This should, I hope, basically do the exact same thing I had before. What am I missing? Yeah, I still don't have a draw, so I need a draw, right? So let me grab a draw. Okay. Now it's really whining about this move does not exist.
Well, you can replace the draw with the for loop that just calls car or calls tree 40 times or whatever.
Oh yeah, we could definitely do that. I think I'll probably just use the draw command because it has the built-in loop. I may as well, right? What I'm running up against is that move and display don't make any sense, right? Yeah, because those are things that trees do, right? So you should need to make, like, tree.move or something. Like, I want to make a tree move. So how do I make a tree move? Well, first things first, you need a tree. Right now I don't have a tree. I just have this idea of how to make a tree. You see that? So if you go look on the tutorial here, they're saying, okay, so this is how you make the class. Right? So I've got the class made. The problem is I don't actually have an object to use. So if you look here, this is where they're saying, okay, we're going to declare an object and we're going to make one. Notice that's basically the exact same thing I was doing with images. You see that? Like, I had an image, or I made an image, and then I initialized the image.
So P image is like a class.
Yeah, so p-image is a little bit like a class declaration. So up here at the top, I want to declare that I'm making a tree. So tree1, semicolon. And hilariously, it's not yelling at me and nothing's turning colors. Right? So this is going to make a tree1 instance of the object tree. Or of the type tree. You guys with me on that? So this thing, this whole business about class tree, that's like a cookie cutter, right? This is me cutting a cookie. Well, or at least it's me saying I'm gonna cut a cookie. To actually cut a cookie, you need someplace in here, maybe in the setup, to actually make one, right? So you're declaring tree1, right? And then someplace else here, you need a take that name of your tree and make a new tree type out of it. What that's going to ask it to do is say, dude, you should probably run the constructor on this thing. Right, so I want, tree. I called it tree1. Tree1 equals new tree. So this is call the constructor. It doesn't need any inputs. Get your cookie cutter out and slam it into the whatever dough, right? So if I run this, it should work, and it should do exactly what it was doing before. Uh-oh. Are we actually... Oh, are we actually drawing anything? No. Damn it. So how do I get it to draw something? Okay, I need to look at tree1. So, like, consider tree1, and what do you want to do to tree1? First, what did I want it to do? I want it to appear, right? How do you make trees appear? Let's see, so if I look at my tree thing, right? So if I'm looking in the tree class, it's got this data that's initialized at this stuff. None of that's going to make it show up, right? It's got a way to move, right? And it's got a way to display. So I want to take my tree and display it. Okay, so let's try that. So that should just make a tree appear somewhere. And if I rerun this, it should randomize where it is. Okay, now I would like to make the tree move.
So when you call the constructor, it doesn't automatically run the display and move methods inside of it.
Nope, because those are things you can do to trees, not things you have to do to trees. So if you write a game, those might be character.hit, right? So that's if a hit lands on your character, you'll want to run the hit method to subtract some damage or something, right? You don't have to run them all the time. You want to be able to run them. You guys with me on that? So now, because I'm calling both the display, so I'm going to say, hey, tree1, show up. And then I'm going to say, hey, tree1, scoot. So now tree1 should show up and scoot. And why isn't it randomizing the... There it is. Cool? Questions, things?
The randomizer always seems to repeat once and then it randomizes.
Yeah, I don't. I'm not sure how random the randomizer actually is. In general, they vary a little bit. Depending on the language, how random the randomizer is actually is a thing that's kind of up for grabs. Most of them draw some kind of time seed, so they're not actually random anyway. They're just pseudo-random. If you wanted a true random, you would have to, well, probably make a deal with the devil. I'm not aware of an implementation of a true random. So, how would I make another tree?
I mean, would you have to declare tree 2 and then go through and do the whole thing again? That seems inefficient. Probably wrong.
Oops. Crap. Let's make 3. So, I'm going to make tree 2 and tree 3. Right? What's that? Yeah, and suddenly this is starting to look really inefficient. So then I need to call the constructor 3 times. So I need tree 2 and tree 3. And then down here I need to...
There's probably a way to do this with for loop and array.
Good call. There is a way to do this with a for loop and an array. But we're not doing that right now. Oh, dang it. I need tree 1 to display and move. I need tree 2 to display and move. And I need tree 3 to display and move. And now I should get 3 trees. Bam. But they all appeared on the left-hand side. This does not look like much of a forest, right? Okay, so let me pull out a piece of code. So it's obvious that one could do this with enough typing, right? Okay, so now I have 8 trees. But this still is not a forest flying by, right? Because I would really like for the X position to be a little randomized too, right? And this is where objects really shine. Because if you want to change one thing about all the objects, you don't have to go in and change it for tree 1 and tree 2 and tree 3 and tree 4 and whatever, right? Which was kind of what Story was running into. I can just go in here and be like, okay, I want the X to be random. So that they start in different spots. So, random, up to width. Bam. That looks more like a forest. Right? Okay, so now I'm at this like, hey, Chris had a good idea. 8 trees is not very many. I don't really want to copy and paste all of this junk over and over again. This is not super hard to write. You guys see this? Like, one thing I could do that would be really dumb is I could make a new sketch that does, like, for... How do you make a for loop work again? Okay, so int I equals 0, comma... I less than 1,000 because I want to make 1,000 trees, comma I plus plus. So we're going to increment by 1. Is it yelling at me? Error on comma because they're supposed to be semicolons. But yeah, like close enough, right? Like go figure it out. So what do I want to put in here? I want to put something like print line, and then I want to make it loop and print these commands so that I can copy and paste them out of the command line into my other sketch. That is a really crappy way to write code. Right? Using a little bit of code to write a lot of crappy code to then stick it in another program is dumb. But it's something that we do a lot, actually. The most common thing for this is to write HTML by putting it in a wrap, like writing wrappers. So you write a little for loop to write a bunch of HTML code and then wrap it in some other HTML code and then save the whole thing as an HTML file. Like this is how a lot of websites are generated. If you want to website that has a long list on it, right? Like, it doesn't store that list hard-coded in the HTML. It gets it from somewhere else, and then it has this wrapper on it. If we get Christian from the, he's one of the institutional researchers, if I can get him to come over and chat about it, he'll tell you that he uses HTML wrappers all the time. He was all excited the other day because he's taking an HTML class from Kathy, and he learned what the wrappers do, so now he can change the wrappers. I mean, he's been generating them fine, like, no problem. But so, in order to make this work in a more reasonable way, I would like a lot of trees, right? What? How's what just repeating? Oh, because they're so initially they start off at a random x, right? And then the move command takes over. They're never reinitialized. So they're not reappearing at a random x. They're appearing at a random x and then going off the end and then sweeping back around. Yeah, so that's why they all appear at 0 at the same time they go off the other side. Good question, though. That did actually take me a second to figure out, too. Okay, so we have all these trees that are being declared. So what are you going to Google to make this better? What do you want to do? Yeah, so let's see. I think objects, processing, and what did you think was a good idea? That was not incrementing. What was the other thing that you... Yeah, maybe I could declare them with a for loop. Let's see. For loop to create objects. Right? Like, yeah, obviously we're not the first person to run into this particular beast. Okay, so this is kind of my motivational code here that I found. So this says we should make a car array, call it my cars, and we're going to make new, and we're going to have, obviously, a car array of, what is this? What the heck does car underscore NB supposed to mean? Yeah, that's cars number. That's how many cars do you want to make, right? So I'm going to go back in my processing sketch here, and I'm going to dump a whole bunch of my trees. Right, so I'm just going to go back to having one tree. Oh, God. Okay, and my goal is going to be to create an array of trees using kind of this idea. So I want tree array, which I'm going to call, what do you call an array of trees? Forest. Call it forest, and it's supposed to be new what? Array, and then I guess I should be a good coder and make number of trees equals 1,000 or something. Oops, that's only 100. Why is it annoying? Yeah, I need to tell it what kind of variable this is supposed to be. So what kind of variable should number of trees be? It better be an integer. Okay, and then it's saying that it's annoyed because you must provide either dimension expressions or an array initializer. Huh? Yeah, you need something inside the brackets on trees. So it wants to know how many trees you want to make. Let's try it. Number of trees. What's that?
Because all of that's just a jumble of letters.
Totally. So if you want to do a better variable naming convention, you might do this. Is that really what people call this?
They don't capitalize the first one, so they guess it's humps after the head sort of idea.
Because it might call a method if the first letter is capitalized.
Okay. That seems legit.
It's just a naming convention.
One of the naming conventions is that when you're naming objects or methods, you capitalize them, and when you're naming static variables, you don't. So this one's a little bit weird because, well, frankly, yeah, the of looks like a 0, and forest is an array of objects, so what? Name your stuff what you want. Later people might complain. So I want to make a tree array forest that's new bunches of trees. And now this is complaining because I deleted it. Cool. So let's comment those out. Okay, so if I go back and look at my examples, I got this part down where I made an array of objects, right? And then what is this for loop that they're kind of... What is that thing doing?
So it's running through up to the variable car number, and it's instantiating the, or it's running the constructor for each of them.
Yeah, so what this is, right, basically what this is doing is saying, okay, so you've got an array of trees, but you haven't actually made any trees yet. You just said you intended to. So this is going to go through and actually run that constructor to make an array of trees. Specifically, every time this runs through, this is going to call those two random number generators and get a starting position for each tree. You can see that? So I'm just going to copy this whole thing, and I'm just going to cram it in here. Where should it go? Like, can it go up here? Why not? If I put this in here, it's going to yell. It should yell. I'm waiting for it to yell. There it is. Missing curly bracket. Still yelling that it's missing a curly bracket. It's annoyed because this thing's not in a method. Right? This is supposed to do something. This isn't just a variable declaration. This actually needs to do something. So it has to be in a method now that I have a bunch of methods out. Yeah, let's put it in setup. I only want it to run once. It needs to be in some method. Setup seems like a good spot to initialize an array. Okay, now it's yelling at me for all sorts of stuff. Yeah, and it's yelling at me because, like, this variable doesn't exist because it's supposed to be number, of trees. Okay, and then this is supposed to be, what was the array's name? Forest. And it's yelling me the class car does not exist. Which class am I trying to call these things out of? Tree. Cool. Okay. Now if I do this, if I hit go on this, what's it going to do? Yeah, so it's going to take a second. It's going to take a second. Why is it taking a long time? Yeah, because I'm making 1,000 trees. So in the making of 1,000 trees, I'm loading 1,000 images that were all really big, right? And I'm also calling 2,000 random numbers. Let me cut this down to something reasonable. Yeah, we could load that image out front. That might actually be a really good idea. So down in here, right, we're loading this image.
Oh yeah, we don't want to do that.
If we made that a global variable instead of putting it in here, that might actually be a much better idea. But let's not sweat it for right now. Right now I have a blank white screen. Why is it blank? It's drawing a background, right? And then I commented out the tree1.display and tree1.move because tree1 is a variable that doesn't make any sense anymore. Right? Tree1, not recognized. Tree1, not recognized. Where are your trees now? Yeah, they're in that array forest, right? So if you want the first tree, where's the first tree? It's not called tree 1 anymore. It's now called forest element 0. You guys see that? It's the 0th element in the forest array. That's where the first tree is. Hang on. I just want to try this. So now I should get a tree that should move. And that's only the first tree in the forest. So how do you get the whole forest in there? So I need a for brackets, and I'm wanting to do something like this at least. What goes in here? Okay, integer I is 0 to start. So that's starting at 0 and go up to the length of the forest. And I plus plus. Okay, yeah, so now if I hit go on this, what's it gonna do? Yeah. That's a little bit confusing. Yeah. So what's going on there is that we're calling the display and the move on the first instance of that tree, right? The first tree. We're just calling up the first tree a mess of times and saying, hey you, display, hey you, move, hey you, display, hey you, move, hey you, display, hey you, move. Like 100 times or something. I guess only 10 times. 10 times. But now we should get a whole bunch of trees that move. Cool. And if I want to make more trees, where do I go? Jack up the number of trees. And then just wait. Perhaps. Probably should have done that. But now here we are. So hey, that looks pretty good. That is a lot of trees.
I'm not sure where I'm missing something, but when I in void draw with the loop, when I replace it with I get it cannot be resolved to a variable.
That's semicolon right there.
Okay, cool. Any questions on the whole idea of objects? I'm assuming you are all object masters now after this extremely crash course. Okay, I'm gonna go with probably you're not object masters right now. So, what I would like you to do for your assignment is use any instance of an object at all. Right? So, make an object to do something. I don't care what. So this is extremely open-ended and super vague. The only requirement of this piece of code is that it have an object in it. If it is entertaining and or fun, that would be great.